webinar by Gayatri Sriram. Thank you, Gayatri, for agreeing to conduct this webinar with us today. We are really looking forward to this session with you. And I'll just start with a little about CWE for all of you who are new here today. And CWE, Catalyst for Women Entrepreneurship, is an online, offline platform for any women who wants to start up or scale up their businesses. So you can be at anywhere in your entrepreneurship journey, and you can get in touch with us, and we can help you. Majorly, we work on we have identified a few active areas where our entrepreneurs need help in. And those are finance, networks, mentorship, technology, and business skills. So these are, and how we do this, how do we support any entrepreneur in these to build these entrepreneurial skills is through our network of 24 global and national partnerships, and also 24 mentors and catalysts on our board. Ms. Gayatri Sriram is also one of our mentor and catalyst, and has been a great support to CWE since the very beginning. Gayatri, I would quickly introduce Gayatri now and hand it over to her so that she can start this session, and we don't delay it further. Yeah, so Gayatri Sriram is a business coach with an expertise in strategy, communications, and organization, with a main focus on SMEs and startups. She also is the owner of a podcast, conducts workshops, individual coaching, webinars, e-learning, in-person coaching, and mentoring. She has a great domain experience in startups, business building and scaling, management, education, sales and marketing, communication, public health management. Gayatri, so before I hand it over to Gayatri, just one thing. So this session, how many of you have joined us today, we'd like to thank you, and we'd like to let you know that this session will be conducted in two parts. The first part is today, which Gayatri would mainly concentrate on the strategy. And whatever is discussed today on the call on identifying the strategy, we'll have a follow-up session on Tuesday, the same time, and on the 12th May, 3 p.m. on execution of this session. So the technique basically. So I would request all of you to join the session on 12th also, and only then you will find proper value, because the session has been conducted in 2 parts. Gayatri, over to you. And look forward to an amazing session.
Hi, I'm excited to be here, and very happy to see a lot of familiar CWE faces also here. Let's just get started, because it's quite an intensive topic. Yes. And let's get started. I will be using a presentation, and I'll walk you through that. The intention of today's is to kind of cover the basics. And when we get to the second part, we'll do a lot more in depth on the actual selling part. Okay, shall we start?
Yes, Gayatri. Just once. So Gayatri will start with a presentation now. And for any questions, I would request everyone to please put it on the chat box only, and we'll take this in the last 15 minutes. Thank you.
All right. So let's set the tone for today's webinar. We are looking at B2B or institutional sales, and I thought we'd look at 4 questions. One is always start from the basics. What is B2B or institutional sales? Secondly, why is it important? In today's digital world, is there such a distinction at all? What is different about B2B or institutional sales? And largely, which most of you will be very keenly interested in, is how to identify your target institution or cluster. So I just thought to give you a background. It's a wide topic. So I'm just going to take the topic as though your businesses are already set for B2B, which means you know what product or what service you're providing, and it is kind of set. So let's look at what is B2B or institutional sales. And for that, you have to look at what's B2B or institution. So, the laundry list is big. And just to give us a reminder of what we are looking at, what is the bigger picture, the other businesses, what you know, I mean, the big names, the small businesses, the Infosys, the government organizations, universities. Um, Often we miss out on one or two of this, and I find that when I talk to my clients, uh, you know there's a lot of focus, but also look around you, what other possibilities exist. We miss out on a whole bunch of markets if we just focus on other businesses. There are a lot more out there with budgets pretty big. Maybe the sales process is a bit more involved, but it is worth taking a look at and then relegating it to your back burner if you that's what you want. Universities, government, public services, military, community organizations, they're all big buyers of various different kinds of products. Social development organizations, industry associations, our own good friend NASCOM, for example. So why should we look at it? Yeah. Everybody wants the bigger pie. Don't you want your sales to grow? And when the products are eligible, which means the B2B market can use it, and why they will use it, we'll come to in a couple of minutes, and services that they need, then the revenue for you, the provider, expands a lot. Businesses and institutions are bulk buyers, which means that because they buy a larger quantity, the economies of scale will work for you, which means if you want to work on your overheads, this is one great way of doing, is to find an institution or a business which will buy bulk quantities. If you tell your banker that you have got some big name, like in Bangalore, it's Biocon, it is of course CWE now, it is Infosys, some say HDFC Bank, and some of these things that you have on your client list, the way that they look at you for creditworthiness is different from when you have very many different small sales as such. Large but not very least is reference possibilities. When you want to sell to perhaps a smaller software firm, would you like to tell them that I have Infosys as my client, and that definitely will get them listening to you. So there is a direct economic benefit, and then there is also your marketing, goodwill, other kind of valuation benefits for you when you address the institutional market. So this is the why of it. We looked at what is an institution, and then we looked at why should you attack it at all. So now let's take a minute. Now comes a little bit of work for you. Take a minute and talk to us about what do you think is different about B2B sales. Use the chat window to put them up quickly so that we can kind of take a look at it. Take a minute or so. What's top of your mind? What's different about B2B sales? Okay. 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 Wow. Yeah. All right. So a lot of points here. Volume, long sales process. It is very contract driven. Yes. Top line benefit for sure. Fantastic and very interesting collaborations possible. Yeah. Sometimes the B2B space offers you collaborations directly or indirectly. All right. We look at that as well. Okay. Just moving ahead. Um, So one critical point that I would like to bring to attention, what is the difference is, why does a B2B or a business buy something from another business? It has to facilitate or add value to their brand or bottom line. Which means that if I'm buying software, then it has to help my business grow or be more efficient, which means it has to add value to the bottom line. Sometimes I may buy, if I'm a Amazon, I may buy a very high-end product to add value to my brand. If I'm a store which is selling multiple items or electronic items, I may want to have the marquee brands like Apple and HP on my sales floor so that it adds value to my brand as an exclusive retailer. Yeah. Second thing is the longer cycles. Uh, Typically, because of the high value and also the volume, the sales processes take longer. Depending upon industry, it can take anywhere from 3 months on to 18 months or even much longer, depending on the kind of product, the service, and how core it is to the receiving organization's business. So, for example, if you take that today sanitizers are huge, right? If I'm buying sanitizer, I may not be so particular about the brand unless I hear something negative about it. So I'm going to make a few quick purchases. I may say, okay, I want to buy, for example, 1,000 bottles of sanitizer. I may buy 1,000 from one firm. Very unlikely. Most businesses would like to split their orders, so there is less risk. So I might buy 400 from one, 600 from the other, as long as they are kind of price matching somewhere close by and supply is assured. Yeah. Multiple stakeholders, depending on how mission critical is the word that we use, mission critical the product or services, the involvement of multiple stakeholders is a lot. You know, if it is small, single use, consumable, may not be as much. There will still be large institutions will have purchasing decision making process where finance, the end user, and an expert may be involved. But very large projects, it may even be debated at the board level. So the stakeholders are a lot more. The buying processes are not always transparent. It covers a spectrum. Some organizations will only tell you what happened to your bid or your offer. Some won't even tell you that. Some government organizations do have, for certain value and above, have an open buying process, which is called a tender, open tender. And that's again a much more transparent, relatively more transparent process. Still, the parameters of decision making may not be always clear or apparent to every participant. The structure, we talked about tender, we talked about buying departments and all of that. So there is a process. They will expect certain formats, certain way the information is presented from you, and they'll also respond in a very structured manner compared to a B2C where perhaps it's much more informal and quicker. The reason why we are doing this is because there's a lot more purchasing power out there in the B2B markets. So definitely the difference is that's a great purchasing power. So what does that mean for you? It means that when somebody is offering to multiply your revenue by N or 100 or 20 or times, the way that you will respond will be different than when somebody is just going to give you 10% of your production or 10% of your revenue. So your responses will definitely make a big difference to yourself and the sales or the purchase process of the buying organization. So let's take a pause here. So what have we established so far? We started off with 4 questions. What is B2B or institutional sales? Yeah. So we looked at what are the institutions that buy and why do they buy? Why is it important for you as a business to look at a B2B market? Okay. Now the big question. So having done all this, understood all this, how would you identify your target institution or cluster? A lot of us often we say, okay, I want to get to that company or this area or that geography. In my world, I think it is, I find great value in looking at starting with the why. Why do you want to sell to B2B? What is the value that you perceive? Then, having said that why, you have to say how much. What percentage of your revenue do you want? Some businesses obviously are purely B2B. For example, an Oracle implementation or something, an accounting software. Very unlikely it is a consumer. oriented product, and large refineries, machinery, and all of that. They are purely B2B. So therefore, the answer will be 100%, but not necessarily all. So if you look at the world of electronics, equipment, printers, if you look at other different kinds of consumables, we look at real estate. So many things are there which could go from B2B and B2C. So what is it that you want? How much do you want of that pie? Finally, if you are a B2C business core and you want to extend into B2B, or you want to build on to new markets in B2B, understand what is the bandwidth that you have. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention is, yes, every one of us would like to get that big pie, but you have your efforts, you have an energy, you have other resources that you have to deploy and earn returns from. How much of that can you actually deploy in finding newer B2B markets? Okay. Now, here's a time when you start grabbing your pen and noting stuff down. So we're going to look at each of these three questions or points closely from here on. I'm going to give you a minute or so, and this is a very important question. So other than revenue, everybody knows that I want business, I want revenue. Are there any other reasons for you to aim for that particular B2B space? If you're already in a B2B market and you're aiming, let's say, international markets, what is your particular need? Why would you want to put in the effort to build a market outside? This is for you to write down quietly. So think through, and I'll give you a minute or so. Okay, I hope that you have had the time to think through. I'm moving ahead. So this is what responses I've got, and also my own response to my B2B attempts. First is, of course, revenue. We all agree that is why we are in business. Uh, Next is validation. Sometimes you may have a product, process, or service that needs to be validated. So if you look at a ticketing software and you're looking at a small show right here in Bangalore, that is a B2B too. But what if your ticketing software can be a parallel to Book My Show or does IVR, PVR bookings? And that will be a great validation for your product. So that's one thing that people would look at. Next is, of course, reference. We want great reference sites, and as an old B2B salesperson myself, I think that's like gold. Having a reference site. So if in the past in India, if you were of any size, having the Navratnas or some of the larger organizations like Hindustan Lever on your client list is great. If you look at LinkedIn today, a lot of people will be saying, oh, I did this work for them, I did for Philips, I did for these. The references are very, very important, and they do make your life that much more easier. Next is you're in the volume business. So to get the advantage of volumes and reducing overheads, you may want to go for the big buyers themselves. Instead of selling to 10 different smaller markets, you may want to try and get a cluster that is huge. So take, for example, the Indian Railways. So it's huge. Suppose you're manufacturing automobile cushions, so which can be also used for trains, and you get the Indian Railways on board. Look at the kind of overheads that you'll be cutting, the kind of revenue that you'll be earning, and how would you manage your capacity, especially in industries where you go slab by slab of building up capacity. If you want to fill 10x, then you want to go to markets that you will get that maybe 80% of that taken care of, ideally, so that you don't have idle capacity. Idle capacity has two dangers. One is you're not getting the revenue. Other is that your production systems and equipment can go down because you're not utilizing your capacity. So that is something that you need to think through before you sign on for making more. This is very much valid for products, not necessarily services, unless you looking at IT and software where you have bench capacity, and how do you manage that? So last is branding. The How is it different from reference, you may ask, right? uh, if I want to be seen as somebody who solves large scale problems, I would look at large scale, high scale clients. So that is my brand. If I'm looking at someone who's solving boutique problems, which means I take unique problems and solve them, I want to have five clear or 50 or 100 boutique organizations where I have solved their problems. And be very clear, selling is about solving somebody else's problems so that they can get their lives going smoothly. And that is the kind of branding I'm talking about. I can be a service provider for financial institutions. So let's look at recruitment. A lot of our women entrepreneurs do have recruitment and capacity building as their businesses. If I want to say that I do capacity building in the financial services sector or the IT sector, that is my brand too. So therefore, I may want to address those clusters in the B2B market. Next question I want to look at is, how much of your revenue targets do you want from B2B? This is important, especially if you have a mix of a B2C, B2B, and institutional sales client. Wherever I have said B2B, you can become very specific and say, I want 50% from education institutions, 30% from financial institutions, depending upon the kind of product or service that you're offering. Take a minute and think through this question. Okay, let's look at, yeah. This is something that I learned a little later. If you are part of a large sales organizations, this may not directly apply to you, but for a lot of startups and SMEs, this applies. You always have to make a choice. Where are you going to deploy your resources? And these are the three parameters I found critical. And I know a lot of you are already in the field out there doing good work, so you may want to add to this as we go along. But these three things I would like to emphasize. The kind of people that you have on the field. So this is a challenge for SMEs a lot. When you want to track sales in a new market, how do you find the number of people you require, and how do you make sure that they have the ability, the skills needed to tackle them? So where are you in that band? Then investment. What is your risk appetite? This requires expense. I mean, as we said, the sales cycles are long, so you have to sustain yourself until you hit the jackpot. So what's your risk appetite? And if you do have the risk appetite, where is your funding coming from? Third is management, and this is something a lot of the time we miss. So we look at our sales team, we look at the money, but we forget that as a CXO, you also have to figure out how are you going to invest when you go into the new markets that you want to go to. This depends on the kind of activity mix that the CXO or the CEO is directly engaged in. If you need to be hands-on, so for example, if it is like a person-oriented service that you are, so who you are and what you do and your personal skills matter, then you'll have to be doubly sure that you are able to transfer some of that to somebody else and take on new markets. And if it is much more established and slightly people-rich organization, what is the kind of activity that you directly need to be involved in terms of bringing business into the firm. This doesn't mean your day-to-day management. This means business development. It means marketing presence. It means networking. It means thought leadership in certain services. It means that what is your presence going to bring to the business? How much of a stretch is it going to be, and what can you delegate? And where does it require that you need inputs into the process? The existing activity mix, also the new one. So I invite you to take a look at these three and look at your own business. Where are you in this? Okay, moving on. So here is what I came up with. I came up with a couple of sample scenarios. Please use this matrix to work out something for yourself. So the why, if you remember the why question, why are you doing this beyond revenue? One answer was that I'm purely a B2B product. Why else will I be doing this? And that's very common. And therefore, your target will be 100% of my revenue needs to come from B2B. So what's my bandwidth in terms of funding? I'm currently underfunded. I'm a little bit of a startup scenario, and I have a young team. So which means that I do have directly be involved in either the production and or the business development and a lot of the marketing activities. So if I'm a product, I could go as an OEM. So therefore, I am connecting with B2B markets and establishing a lot of my credibility, my validation, all of that happens. I could become a white label products provider or a solution provider, or I could choose a channel partner who will help me reach those B2B markets. It counters or cancels the disadvantages of an underfunded young team where the CEO's daily input is a lot. Let's look at the next one. I know I have a B2B product, but right now I'm looking for a reference in branding because I think that is going to be the stepping stone to open up other critical markets for myself. So I'm not so stuck with targets. I'm open. I do have a motivated team because I've done some work, and I do have access to credit funding or some similar kind of funding. So here, because I want a reference and I want branding, I'm saying you'll have to kind of look at a two-pronged approach where you look at a small boutique client, if that is relevant in your industry, and a large institutional client. So let's look at two examples. So let's say that I have products that are good corporate gifts, yeah? Which means I do come from B2C as well as B2B. So my B2B is where I'm open because as and when I get orders, I can deliver them. I have a niche area of corporate gifts. So I look at a small boutique client where I probably give high-end products, gifts, and I probably also look at an institutional client which will buy my corporate gifts in bulk. So both of these I need to look at and invest time, money, and effort to bring. That is, instead of going open and covering all the markets, I look at a couple of those boutique clients or institutions and go after them. So this is my larger strategy. And again, the next one is I have a B2B product. I'm looking at 60% from an institution and institutional sales. Let's say I have a product that works well for the Indian Railways or airports or something. Maybe one of those waiting room seats that I produce. It can go for a small clinic in Malleshwaram. At the same time, it can go for railway waiting rooms anywhere or airport waiting rooms. So I have large institutions and businesses that I'm looking at. You could go for white label or OEM to test how well your product does in this market, how is the pricing, and be very clear that your channel partner is can actually help you in building a pricing strategy to open up new markets. Yeah. Okay, so now we have identified the cluster. So there is this horse that you have identified, very beautiful one. So how do you get the horse to the water? That is your, how do you reach some of these clusters? So to tell you a story a little bit as to why I decided to do this webinar, I was interacting with a few clients who work in the B2C sector, and talking about moving to B2B, and realized that there is this hold back, that people are not wanting to, thinking it's such a big task to move from a way of doing business to another way of doing business. And this is the reason I said, okay, I pinged Ayushri and said, let's talk about this. I don't know how many other people in our cluster or our organization are wondering, how do I get to a B2B market? So this symbol of a horse came from there, is that literally you'll have to bring the horse to the water. In session 2, we'll talk about how to make the horse drink. Okay, so here we are. So though we say institutions and businesses, one thing to really bear in mind is people buy from people, and people buy from people whom they trust well. Next factor is, how close is your product or service to the core business that you're providing? Yeah. If you're selling coconut oil to a soap manufacturer, very core to the business. If you're selling, say, office space to the same soap manufacturer, it's not so core. There are many options that they would choose from. Third point is, organizations always need to cover their risks when it comes to input products like the coconut oil or office space. They will have a certain risk mitigation parameter. It may mean financial, that they will ask, okay, I need to kind of get a insurance from you that this office space will have all of these things, and that you are covered under fire and material and all of that. Or they may ask for references. They may ask for, in larger organizations, they will ask some caution money or earnest money or something like that, until you make sure. There will be exit clauses, there will be adjudication and arbitration clauses and all of that. So since the individuals who run these organizations are not necessarily the owners, there is a lot more thought and process that goes into covering their risks. Yeah. So what does it mean in terms of connecting? I'll come to that. Now, why will they buy certain products? So sometimes it is, if they buy your product, they get good PR. So if it's a soap manufacturer, they say, oh, I buy pure organic coconut oil from a farm in Bangalore. Yeah. Or if I don't buy something, there is bad PR. So suppose I in the recent past, in the 5-6 years in the past, anything that is to do with safety and fire extinguishers and things like that, larger organizations, buildings cannot do without. If you don't have them, somebody writes about it. If the lift doesn't have safety equipment, somebody writes about it, and you get bad PR. So there is one way for you to sell your products. So can I enhance their PR by my product or service? Last but not the least is, what is their competition doing? Especially, I used to see this a lot in the education institution market. If you go to them and say that all ICSE schools are doing this, and you as a CBSE school, if you want to compete with them, you need to have that service, or maybe that dictionary or that activity or that program, and then they will probably listen to you. So everybody wants to kind of cancel out or bring for themselves a slight competitive advantage. So now this is where your cluster is, where they are. So how do you approach them? How do you find out whether any of these things are true to your cluster? One is research. This cannot be overstated. You need to do your homework. And secondary, that is finding out from published sources, reading industry journals, visiting fairs and seminars and conferences. That is secondary
Cutting you
research.
for a minute here. We have 10 minutes to 3:45. Just
Sure, thank you. And the other is direct. If possible, where possible, just go meet potential buyers or users even better and ask them, why would you buy this kind of products? Who are you buying from? Uh, Often people are maybe okay to talk, but I think to do your homework, it's very, very important. You go out there and do it. Um, Okay, this is a very tricky thing. When you talk about building your network, it's not the number that is of value. It is who you know, definitely, and what do they do in the kind of cluster that you're looking for. So we talked about multiple clusters. We talked about education institutions. We talked about government institutions. We talked about military. We talked about business clusters. Look at your sheet right now. Can you name two or three key players in your target cluster? And if you can, find ways of connecting with them. One of the things I find is being part of conferences or meets. It's currently not probably the most advisable thing to hold a conference, but things will change. You will get there, and as you know, B2B sales is long term, long run. So think about that. How can you help somebody? Can you get on a committee that they need help? Is there a relief committee they are part of? Can you support them? Can you offer to help out a school that they're supporting? So in a way, get into their space, let them get to know you, and you get to know them. Now, this is another thing. When somebody asks you, what is it that you have? What is it that you're offering? Very often we find that the pitches, the collateral, the material is not as ready, and you get apologies. Oh, this is somewhat dated. I haven't added this current research data that I have got. So there is always some solpa adjust madi, please adjust kind of a thing. Let's not get into that. When you have your pitch, and that is your product out there, until a person sees your product or uses your product, your pitches, your marketing collateral, you need to have that. And this has to refer to the target organization's objectives. And you can circulate it. You circulate it on social media, you circulate on digital media. It doesn't change where you go, what you do. The core messaging of that has to connect with the target organization's objectives. You remember we talked about it earlier today, is to say how your product or service solves some of these things. How core is it for them? How much PR can you get or not get? And look at that. How much of risk are you covering by your target organization buying and using your product? How can they get competitive advantage by using your product or service? So these things have to be put out there, and this has to be there in all your collateral, your website, your presentations, your decks, all of that. And one tactic that I find is that if you know somebody and can find somebody nowadays, it's pretty easy on LinkedIn, and you have a pitch or a message that is valuable to them, they will write back. It's the way, the timing of course matters a little bit, but the content of your messaging to connect, to just say hi and say, this is why I've written to you. This also works. Last but not least is a test run. If In the institutional markets, especially in the businesses and government institutions, etc., people do this is, even though you know that you may not be fully ready for a tender, is to apply that and try and see where do you stand. You get a lot of market information, you get to interact, you get to see how the process works. That is one way. The other is knowing that you may not be fully prepared, is to just go and push the sales process through a little bit and see what is the feedback that you're getting at each step. A lot of this is back end action. It is not going and meeting the client, and this is part of strategy, is for you to keep all this ready before you get to facing your critical sales calls. And as I've noted here, each of these could be a separate topic in itself. I think there is lots to do here. B2B sales is not a seat of the pants, casual approach. There is a lot of work to be done, a lot of structure to be put through in your messaging as well. So I'll pause here for a couple of minutes for questions, and then I'll kind of take it up and sum it up.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. That was indeed very informative and interactive, and I'm sure everyone on the call has gained a lot from this. And Gayatri, I'd also request you to talk about how the attending the second part of the webinar is
Sure. Yeah.
at the end, and we'll come to that.
Yes.
Gayatri, there were a few questions that we had received earlier,
Sure.
which I shared with you.
Sure.
And from that, I would like to let everyone know that some of those questions Gayatri has already covered and would be covering in her next session. And there are two questions, Gayatri, which I'll read it out to you, and
Okay.
then we'll take the questions from the chat box.
Okay.
That will work?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Gayatri, this question is by Anita Kanagaraj. Her question is, and Anita, I would request you to please come on video. Whoever's question I'm reading out, I request that participant to please be on video. You can mute your audio. How to get business from foreign countries. She's in the ITES space. So that was her question.
Okay. Anita, I think what I just said in the last two slides kind of makes sense. And I find that international markets are a little bit more amenable to be being pinged on forums like LinkedIn, and being part of groups online, making your presence felt in some of these forums, making those connections. One is, you have to talk about yourself, your work, not just as a business, but also the value of it. Come out as an expert in the areas that I know that you have expertise. So that's why I'm very confidently saying, please present yourself as an expert in some of these forums, and connect with 2 or 3 key leaders in these international markets. And international markets, especially the Western market, I'm looking at, once things clear up and the COVID danger is lifted, they will be quiet. The way they do business is they're quite happy to do on electronic media. So you can talk to them, send a sales deck, and the responses, you will get a yes or no answer. We have found that happens a lot. So
yeah. Should we move on to the next question, Gayatri?
Yes. Yeah. Any questions from Anita? Follow up. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, we can connect her to you later, Gayatri, if there's any follow up questions in the interest of time. Yeah. The next question is by Shweta Gandhi. How to get in touch with the right POC?
Okay. So I would like to go back and talk about that. When you talk about a person who's responsible for buying, you can do 2 of 3 things. I mean, couple of things, not necessarily 2 or 3. One is to try a test run. As we said, if it is something that is valuable for them and for you, and you have something that's somewhat ready, go and do a test run. Try to sell. You know that you may not get, and you just and effort. If it works for you and you are able to put that investment of time and money and people, do a test run if you know that. The other is to look at online channels. I mean, I cannot tell you how digital presence really helps. You can get the phone number, email ID, a lot of it online. Look at different. No, don't just look at their pages. And if you know the name of the person, look at your LinkedIn groups, connect with them, ask for references, ask for connects, and this is something that you can get. Often people, unless it's very classified, people will share and tell you this is the way. They may respond, they may not respond. The third way is to go for conferences. When you know where your target customers come together, trade conferences. So for example, big data. If your client is into big data, attend big data conferences, attend a breakfast meeting, go for trade organizations, presentations, and webinars and things like that, and you will get those connects. It's not. Sometimes there are these lead generators. I have not talked particularly about lead generators. I'll talk about that on Tuesday as part of the sales. They will get you, but rely on more of a personal connect. As I said, they buy from people they trust, and you have to get there closer to that to get them to listen to you.
Thank you, Gayatri. The next question is from Anushka Jaisingania and her question is, would like to know how we can explore and identify new markets for frozen food products.
Yes. Okay. So, hi, Anushka. The frozen food, if I look at it, I see this as two things. One is, are you going for frozen food for the consumer, or are you going to a retailer outlet partner? I think if you're going for a retail outlet partner, then the channel partners work, or identify your target company. And this frozen food is like right now so big, Anushka, you should be on the job, sending it out there, is to put sampling, find retail outlets where they match your product category, the other products match your product category, and get them to put out samples. So you find that. So you have a person going there, do a marketing plan. You have a person going there, being present, answering questions, approaching their customers, and talking to them about it. It is a matter of grabbing shelf space and showing that they have return value in keeping your products over there. That is one. And we can talk in detail a little bit. It's a very exciting thing right now, offline, Anushka.
Thanks, Gayatri. The next question is from Sujata. Any recommendation for good SME networks to join? How important is it to collaborate with back-end or front-end integration?
If depends on the kind of SME you are and where is your target market. There is two aspects. One is getting cluster advantage by being part of a cycle, so CII kind of a thing. There is definitely value. Depending upon the kind of industry you are, I don't have that right now, so I can't tell you. But perhaps when we meet on 12th, we can.
She's in the financial services, Gayatri.
Okay, all right. So financial services as a technological tool or service provider, I don't. So I'm going with the idea that you have a technology tool or a IT tool for financial services, and please then go ahead and work with websites that investment firms, small investment organizations. I'm also thinking that there is value in you talking to the tech parks once things clear up, because a lot of people, youngsters who are having money to invest, come work out of tech parks. Excuse me. Yeah. So and that is one. Yeah. So the backward forward integration very much a good idea. So I think there's some very creative hat. I think one of the things I had said was go for something that you normally would not do. And if you have the bandwidth, go for it. So the IT tech park, and I'm also thinking that if you're aiming really long term, uh, go with the institutes of learning as well. So you create a captive market for yourself to say, okay, this is the kind of retirement life that you want, and things like that. So there is a potential to do both backward and forward in a very, very creative way.
Sure. Thanks, Gayatri. The next question is from Neeta Gulati. Can you give a few good ideas to scale businesses in education training area and getting orders?
Okay. Um, I think I'll be taking this up a little bit more on 12th.
Yeah,
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 it's
yes.
about sales technique, but
Yeah, when we'll be
you
discussing the technique, yeah?
yeah, yeah. There is also one thing I want to say is it will be very valuable if the homework that we discussed today in understanding why the client will connect with you. So I specifically talked about the ICSE, CBSE, that competition that exists, and international schools in Bangalore. What is the value that you're providing for them? And here in schools and educational institutions, this is not just the institutions. The institutions go to tell you, come back and tell you, okay, the parent has to pay or this one has to pay or something like that, right? So how will you kind of talk about that? These are some of the things that an education institution selling is something that I'll surely talk about on the 12th. But yeah, that comes as technique. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Gayatri. So, Neeta, we would request you to please join the session on 12, the follow-up session, which would be crucial to you to understand and get your answers to your question. The next question, Gayatri, is from Padma Rajagopalan. What would be the key points to take care of when you are targeting decision makers who are very senior in big pharma producers and your product is not essential but will give them value in quality?
So one is the messaging. What does the when you say when she talked about value and quality, how does that translate to the business bottom line for the pharma companies? Is there a number that you can put to it?
Padma, would you like to answer Gayatri's question with a number quickly, please?
Okay. Yes. So I am on the call. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
the specific question is it's very tricky. This is non-essential in the sense that this is a regulated market which we are targeting. Unfortunately, the regulatory people don't call this essential to run the business. But we cannot put a number on the value or whatever because each process is so specific, and unless we are in it and they do the entire exercise themselves, they may not be able to really give us information. So each process has a different value for this. So like you said, we will be addressing mostly people's issues, but what really happens is that when they are naturally, the big pharma producers will take it, but what stops them is that the entire documentation and validation that goes with it is so intensive that they don't know whether they want to go through it at this point of time.
Okay,
So how will you
I
address
got it.
this? Yeah.
Okay, I got it. So it is some of it I'll be addressing on the 12th as to how to work with influencers and gatekeepers. Um, the critical thing here is for you, Padma, is to identify a reference site and work with them. So it may not be the revenue earning client, but there may be somebody who may be able to demonstrate to others that this process you're recommending works.
Yeah, so we have been very successful with these things,
Yes,
and
and
we have a
then
good market. We have a good name in the market, and we're called very
yeah,
trustworthy, and all that is covered. But still,
yes.
I think there is a little bit of flag in the scale up. I don't see it taking off the way it should. You know,
Okay.
so
Let's take it up on. Send
okay,
me the detail. I'll
Yeah,
probably take it
Vanna,
up as a case study.
in the interest of time, you can please connect to us and we'll connect you to Gayatri and also request you to join the next session so that
okay,
this can be discussed in detail. Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
I Shri Padma can send me the detail and maybe I can use it as a case study for.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'll do
Yeah,
that. I'll do that. Yeah.
yeah.
The next question, this would be the last question, Gayatri, that we would take.
Yes.
And this is
Yeah.
actually a follow-up from Anita, who had asked about the foreign,
Yes.
how to
Yeah.
foreign this thing. And her
Yeah.
question is, most of the time corporates doesn't encourage startups. They say that minimum criteria is for the market should be 5 years.
Yeah.
How can that be cracked? How can she crack that? She's into the services industry. Like,
Yeah, so that is, yeah, that's not just the start, not just the large companies. A lot of governments also tell you have to exist. Partner, that is the backward integration, forward integration. Partner with somebody who has that, and that's something I do myself. Is I partner, and where needed, you have to decide how much of it is worth giving for the relationship where it already exists, and that is your CXO hat wearing decision. There's
sure.
no other way. You have to partner because you don't have the fundamental filtering criteria. So no point in beating your head up to with those and convincing them. Partner.
Yeah. Thanks, Gayatri. Anita, I hope your question is answered and request you to join us on Tuesday so that you can understand the entire process in detail more. So, Gayatri, we would end the session here.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for conducting this for us. And this was a really interesting session, and we are really excited for the next one, which will be on the 12th. And thank you everyone for joining us. Please do join us for the next session, which should pay attention on all the techniques. Today, Gayatri discussed the strategies. The next session will be techniques, and only then the webinar would be complete, and you would find maximum value. Yeah, so we look forward to seeing you all on 12th May at 3 p.m. To know more about CWE and the work we do, please get in touch with membership@cwe.org.in. The details have been put up in the chat box too. And I would also request you to follow all our social media channels so that you can stay connected to us and be connected with all our updates. All the video of this webinar would be uploaded on YouTube. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can refer to this webinar later. And also, we have two kinds of membership. So that when you get in touch with us, we can tell you more about that. But I'm just connecting a member benefit that we have to Gayatri's seminar today. Gayatri talked about pitches, how important your pitch is. So as a CWE member, when you sign up as a member with us, you get an opportunity to perfect that 1-minute pitch of yours. To send us a 1-minute pitch to us, and we work with you to perfect the 1-minute pitch on your company, and focusing on all the important things that the pitch should cover. So this is just one of the member benefits we have. We have a list of other things, so you can just get in touch. Also, our next webinar after Gayatri's, that would be on the 12th. Our next webinar will focus on B2C companies. I know some of you here are both focusing on B2B and B2C, and this is about business challenges, capturing business challenges. And but however, the next webinar would be by Rini Datta on capturing business challenges. But this is a member exclusive webinar only, so only CWE members can join that webinar. And it would be a very focused and interactive workshop webinar. We are calling it a workshop webinar because we are also connecting to some of the members before and taking data from them. So if you are interested to join that webinar, please connect to us first. You can become a member and then you will be eligible to join that webinar. Thank you again. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Gayatri. Hope to see you all on the 12th of May. Stay safe and stay home, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you on 12th.
Yeah.